Hello, and welcome to the Mindset Bloomcast with Mallory. I am Mallory McGary. I'm your host, and I am also the CEO and founder of Beautifully Blooming. You can find me at beautifullyblooming.com or send in questions, suggestions, or anything to Mallory at beautifullyblooming.com. You are listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio, TV, and podcasts, the number one internet talk network. So, today I'm really glad to have you guys here. Um, we're going to go through a topic that is something that people talk about and then don't really um, follow through on. It's one of those topics I find that a lot of people aren't super good at following through, me included. So, in all transparency, and it's been something I've been like revamping some of these as I've been going through the last couple of weeks and have really started to dial in on what they are. And so they are boundaries, as you can see. And if you haven't figured out what I meant. So, first of all, before we dive into this, I want you guys to think of a house and then the fence around it. And some houses have shallower fences, some houses have really long fences, some houses have zero fence. And think about that for a minute and relate that to your life. If you're the house, where's your fence? Or do you have a fence to start with? Um, well, what I've also come to know is that in all different areas of our lives, with family, you may have different type of boundaries. With work, you have different type of boundaries. Um, Community, you have different types of boundaries, things like that, that your fence is not always defined in the same spot as it is for in each area of your life. You have what I deem different areas, such as like financial boundaries, family boundaries, spiritual boundaries, um, career boundaries, or work boundaries. And those boundaries are all different depending on where you're at, what your goals are, things that are important to you. And as a couple episodes ago, I feel like we've kind of led up to this without me really. This has been on my docket, but not as quite as soon as I had planned. But um, the topics we've talked about have kind of led to boundaries. We've talked about goals and goal setting. We've talked about expectations and grace. We've talked about forgiveness of other people and of yourself to try and grow. And that's where these boundaries are going to start to come in. So, thinking of back to your house, you as the house, where are your boundaries set? Where is that fence? Where is your fence line sitting? Is it going to be somewhere close to you, somewhere far away from you, non existent for what that is? We're going to kind of dive into a story before we get through kind of that topic. But um, as a personal experience, and some of my friends and I were talking the other day about actually having boundaries. And for one of us, it was really easy to have boundaries set at our jobs of trying to everybody working a hybrid schedule or a remote schedule or went from the office to a remote schedule, of having those boundaries of this is when I'm done working. These are the times I'm done. I'm off. I'm no longer thinking about work, and kind of creating that line, especially being at home, of having that line that says, I am not going to delve into work later than this. And if it is super important and urgent, hopefully those are few and rare in your case, but if they're absolutely urgent, you can make an exception. But for as a hard and fast rule, at 5 o'clock or whatever time you're done, that's the time you stop thinking about work. You reset your mind to be back at home, back in your home life, and what that looks like. And I found some of my friends thought that was really hard, that having this transition of having a hybrid schedule and being at home, it's easier to just say, "Oh, I'll hurry and take care of that really fast," and hop on your computer, and then, you kinda get down that work rabbit hole because 'cause you're on a roll, and then before you know it, it's 9 o'clock at night, and you were supposed to be done at 5, and now you've just kind of created this downward spiral of everybody wanting to get a hold of you and knowing that you'll jump in whenever you can, which is a simple example career wise, but also with families. I have a friend of mine that has uh, family boundaries that says this is where you can like what we allow at our house, what we don't allow at our house, and things that are good for my kids and things that aren't the best for my kids. So they have a defined boundary around that. And then we are only going to um, show up at different times or like at certain times because our schedules are just too hard. It's too hard with all of our kids. And I have another friend who's, if their family calls, they're gone at the drop of a hat and they go wherever and whenever their family calls. And um, those are two simple examples of where you're at in your life and things that could be happening in your situation. And they seem easy to say, right? We're going to set boundaries that say we are going to do X and we will be done by Y, but sticking to them, that's the hard part. Sticking to those, that time frame, actually sticking to saying I am done working at 5. If it's not an absolute emergency, then you, I will take care of it tomorrow. It's totally fine. And actually shutting down and regrouping. So, as we know in the last couple of episodes, that I like to delve into the actual definition of boundaries. You kind of got part of my definition of what boundaries are, but um, boundaries are a space or limit between you and another person, a clear place where um, you begin and end. And the purpose of setting a healthy boundary is to protect and take care of you. So boundaries are not bad. Let's put that out there. Boundaries are not bad. Boundaries are good for you. And with different boundaries, you have the limit and line of saying, this is as much as I can take, and this is what is good for me and myself. Maybe it's for your mental state, emotional state, physical state, all of the above. But the boundary says this is as much as I can take for this space. And it's a healthy thing to do. And some boundaries do grow, some boundaries get smaller depending on what happens in the situation. But having a boundary is not bad. And I think in some way we need to reframe that framework in our thinking of saying you have to have boundaries means it's a bad thing. Saying you have to have boundaries is a bad thing. It's really for your own self. It's protecting yourself. It's keeping uh, your mental and emotional state on a stable plane. Um, and sometimes a complete lack of boundary can indicate that you don't have a strong identity or you are so in with someone else that you can't tell if where you begin and that person ends. So healthy boundaries help establish your identity. It helps identify your individuality. It helps um, hold you responsible for and accountable for the things that you may not think that you actually need that for. And it can help you hold you accountable to the things that actually matter and the things that you want accountability for. And as part of my program that I have, we go through this of you are a person before any life event, whether you're married or have a partner or um, a boyfriend, girlfriend, you are a person, you're an own individual. And then you take on the role of motherhood and you you are still a person. It's easy to be defined by the roles that you play in life. It's easy to be defined as For me, I could be defined as a wife, a mom, an employee, an entrepreneur. I can let those be so absorbed in all of those that they end up defining me rather than me defining them. So as in my program, we go through define you being the person, you having that individuality, and yes, you still have a lot of roles to play, but you are the star of your own show, and every other role you play and that you have in your life, you are your supporting roles. They add to the multifaceted person that you are, but they are not who you are. And so that's something that has to do with boundaries as well, is that the way you frame yourself is and immerse yourself in is what's going to define you. And if your boundaries do define your individuality, then it's going to be something that is individual to you. My boundaries are not necessarily the same as my husband's boundaries. And in different areas, we may have close and similar type of boundaries because we've talked about them. But as of different things, different areas and different roles that we play, we have different sets of boundaries, and one is not bad and the other is not bad. They're personal to us and they're personal to how we function and what we know that we can handle and what defines us in that space. And there are the boundaries that he has a completely different job than I do. And so some of his boundaries I won't understand. I will think they need to either be looser or tighter and vice versa. But I don't fully understand all of the scope of that. So I can't tell him exactly what boundaries he needs to set because I'm not sure in the scope of that project what that is. So that's something to take into consideration if you are in a relationship going through some of that type of thing. Just if you have similar goals, you're going to want to have similar boundaries because it's not fair to have, in my experience, it's not fair to have one of you expect one thing and the other of you expect something completely different and to not talk about it. That's part of what came with our expectations in those unspoken expectations of if I'm expected to be I expect to go to my family all the time and do all of these things with my family. And on the other hand, my husband's thinking the same thing. So when the schedules conflict or something happens like that, one of us is going to be more upset because we're not on the same page with what those boundaries are, and we haven't communicated those expectations. So having that set um, togetherness, there are some things that having that set mindset together is going to be way more beneficial in the long run. And then that way you can help hold each other accountable to those boundaries that you do set together of saying, okay, here's this and here's that. So it is important to note too that most boundaries are often psychological or emotional, but they can be physical. We mostly set boundaries to um, break that emotional barrier of maybe you have someone in your life that is toxic and for you and you're not maybe really not ready to say goodbye to them or cut that tie or they serve a different purpose so you still need to have that part in your life, but setting that boundary of this is as close as you can get, then that is where it's going to be most beneficial to have that boundary because then you're protecting yourself emotionally and um, psychologically instead of trying to go through all of those motions and um, whatever the effect is. Maybe you get physically sick. Maybe it's just kind of a downward spiral of thoughts that you can't quite control and pick up if they're too close to your space, or maybe it's just that you feel anxious all the time. Whatever that feeling is, by having that boundary and accepting that that is the line, then those feelings you can still be together, but those feelings won't be as intense or you won't have them at all for that. And sometimes physical boundaries are healthy in the fact that um, if you don't need that, if you don't need the physical part of it, that um, or that you can just say that's not part of what I want in my life because that's too much for me. It's as important and crucial as setting and um, emotional or psychological boundaries. There's part of the um, boundaries. You're going to have a lot of different people, right? If you're going to have ones with your family, ones maybe with um, coworkers or educators, wherever you are in your life in that part. You'll have them with um, different type of, you'll have those professional boundaries, that's what we'll call them. And you'll have them with, you can have them with money or just your own. You can even have some with yourself of knowing that I have an unhealthy relationship with something, that to have that boundary is not just saying no. Having that boundary is not just saying, oh no, I'm not okay with that. It's saying I commit to not do this anymore. So it is what setting that boundary is, holding you accountable because you're committing to yourself that that is is not a thing. Um, in this, as I've done delves kind of into my research a little bit, that how to create um, healthy boundaries. And it seems as easy as saying, I will not do this. But creating them is something out of fear, maybe fear of being rejected or fear of having a confrontation. So you're going to be afraid to set a boundary for that, of saying, uh, I need to set a boundary with this toxic person in my life, but I'm afraid of if I set that boundary and I let them know what that is, that they're going to maybe abandon me. They're going to confront me. It's going to be something that doesn't sit well with me emotionally. So it's almost better to have them here rather than to cut it off completely, because the back end seems a lot more daunting than having um, the actual conversation to say that. And you can have that conversation with anything. A couple episodes ago, we talked about having those conversations with yourselves, that having your expectations, you have expectations for yourself. So having that conversation with yourself of saying, I am having setting this boundary because A, B, and C, and um, it's going to be healthy for me because I am doing exactly what is going to benefit me and help me to grow in the long run. And I'm cutting out something that isn't serving me in the way that it needs to serve me, or it may not be serving me any longer the way that it once did. So we are not necessarily taught to set boundaries in um, our day-to-day lives. It's just kind of comes as trial and error, I feel like. We kind of we'll set them and then see if it works, and then if it doesn't, then we try again, or revamp, or we are too afraid to have those, to set that boundary for whatever the fallout might be of that. But there's two types of boundaries. Talked a little bit about healthy boundaries, and we're going to flip the coin a little bit and talk about some unhealthy boundaries. And yes, as in all things, opposition is there. So you're going to have good and bad. You're going to have healthy boundaries and unhealthy boundaries. And it's harder to define sometimes what those both are when you're looking at them, because you may be thinking you're setting a healthy boundary when in actuality you're setting an unhealthy boundary, or allowing that healthy boundary to become unhealthy because you don't stick to it, which is something that is important. So, unhealthy boundaries are characterized by sharing it too much too soon or closing yourself up and not expressing what you need or your want or why you're setting that boundary. You have that feeling of being responsible for someone else's happiness. So, back to that toxic person in your life, you feel responsible for them to be happy. So, you have that unhealthy boundary of keeping them happy. Um, you don't have the ability or comfortability to say no in the face of fear, um, in fear of rejection or abandonment. You don't know who you are exactly, and so you base your feelings on and your self-worth on how others treat you. And then ultimately, all setting an unhealthy boundary does is disempower you. You allow others to be the star of the show and you just follow. You don't take responsibility for your own life, which we've kind of touched on earlier a little bit of saying that that is exactly what is um, there for you. It's just going to be holding on to something that doesn't serve you. So, we're going to hop to a commercial break really quick. But when we come back, we're going to talk about healthy boundaries and how to take care of yourself within those healthy boundaries. So, you are listening to the Mindset Bloomcast with Mallory. I am your host, Mallory McGary, and I am the founder and CEO of beautifully blooming.com. You can find me at beautifullyblooming.com or email any feedback or questions at Mallory at beautifullyblooming.com. You are listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio, TV, and podcast, the number one internet talk network. We'll see you back here in just a minute. Great. We're back. That was a really quick commercial break. Um, you are listening to the Mindset Bloomcast with Mallory. I'm your host, Mallory McGary. I am the founder and CEO of beautifullyblooming.com. And you are listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, the number one internet talk and radio network and podcasts as well. So we're back. We just got done talking about unhealthy boundaries and how they don't serve you and that they are a thing. We think we're setting healthy ones, but we're not. So in a quick recap, they're categorized by you feel responsible for people's happiness. You have a fear of saying no for fear of rejection or abandonment. You aren't quite sure how you feel about yourself, so you base your feelings about you on how others see you and treat you. And then you disempower yourself. You feel powerless and don't take responsibility for your own life. So you kind of become a follower from those around you and allow them to take you down whatever journey and path that they would like to. Um, so on the flip side of that, we have healthy boundaries. And healthy boundaries are the ones that serve us in a way that empower us. They make us grow, they keep us protected, they protect our emotions, they protect our psychology. Oh, that was a hard word. The psychology and our mental state. They protect us, they can protect us physically. Depending on a situation, they protect us physically, but it helps us grow and thrive and be comfortable in the people that we are. And that's important right now, I feel like, in the world. We just need people to be confident and comfortable in the people that they are. We don't have, um, it's harder and harder to find the follow because you never really know what you're exactly following. And so, not being able to have those healthy boundaries can lead you maybe down a path you don't want to go down by setting those unhealthy boundaries. So, we're going to talk about the healthy boundaries, and healthy boundaries allow you to have a higher self-esteem and self-respect. You share personal information gradually, and it's in a mutually trusting relationship. If I'm sharing something, you're sharing back, and it's a give and take relationship, and we trust each other to share that information. We're also protecting our physical and emotional space and our mental space from intrusion of things that don't serve us. We have an equal responsibility we have an equal partnership and responsibility, whether you have boundaries with together with a spouse or a partner, and then also with the people you're setting the boundaries with, you have that shared responsibility to keep that boundary intact. You become more assertive. You can truthfully say yes or no and be fine when others say no to you. You are able to separate your needs, feelings, and thoughts and desires from others so you know exactly what you need and how you feel. And it's okay if somebody thinks differently than you. It's not going to define who you are. And then it also, having healthy boundaries empowers yourself to make healthy choices and be responsible for yourself. When we spoke earlier in the episode, we talked about you being the star role in your life, and having every other hat that you wear or role that you play is a defining role, is a supporting role to yourself. It's that multifacetedness that sits with everybody, and you get to define what all of those roles get to be. They aren't defining you. You're not just this person. I am not just a mom. I am not just a wife. I am not just a business owner. They're part of who I am, and they make up of different characteristics that I have, and they've grown some characteristics just out of fruition, and or they've just expounded some of my other characteristics, and which is great and perfect, and I wouldn't complain. They've also done the reverse. They've also shown me great things and things I should work on, things that probably aren't the best, that maybe I need to flip the script on or change or let go of. And those are what I call my healthy boundaries, because they're brought out by other things, but those things don't define me in what they are. And I have the ability and comfortability in saying no to something that isn't quite serving me the right way. So for boundaries as well, and having these healthy boundaries, it comes with self-care. And that's a term we've heard a lot. I'm going to say within like the last 6, 7-ish years. But it's been really hit hard on the last couple of years, especially with the state of the world that we've lived in the last 2.5 years. But um, taking care of yourself, that's number one. You can't have healthy boundaries if you're not taking care of yourself, because keeping yourself responsible for holding those boundaries, it's going to be exhausting. It's going to be a lot of extra work that isn't necessarily needed, because you're not taking care of yourself. It's just it's easier to let boundaries go as you become exhausted. You become emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, just have no time for it. So it's just like, why not? I'm just going to give in to moving this boundary when it was at a good spot. And now we're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit on what that boundary looks like. So self care. Now, self care is something I've been looking at as well, as I've been kind of researching this topic as well. Of it doesn't look the same for everybody. Self care to everybody is not a day at the spa. Self care is not necessarily taking a bubble bath for some. It's not just in your mind you picture a nice little meditative state. That is a type of self care, and great if it's something that you are attracted to. But also, when I have gone through this the last couple of weeks, going through this topic, that I found that being outside, just has being in nature, has been my form of self-care. It's rejuvenated my spirit in ways that I hadn't paid attention to before, by going on one-on-one dates with my kids, and having those moments of where I'm fully immersed in their world. That's a form of self-care. I'm taking care of myself because I'm also taking care of they're filling my cup. I needed them to fill my cup. So that's my form of self-care. It's also maybe reading a book. It could look like going on a trip, going on a trip alone, going on a trip with friends, whatever that looks like. It could be dinner out at a restaurant, something that makes your cup feel full and that something that you do because it brings you joy. And not everybody's joy is brought together by the same place. That's what makes us an amazing world is we're not all searching for the same thing. And it helps those that self-care helps rebuild the things we've become exhausted from. It helps rebuild up that emotional state, helps you feel full, builds up that energy that you can give to others, builds up that your mental state of regrounding yourself and saying, okay, these are the things that are important and these are my priorities. And these are things that aren't important and they don't serve me. So I've got to get rid of them because they are taking way too much time, way too much energy, way more than I actually want to or care to give to this type of thing. So I've got to let it go. That's setting that healthy boundary of recognizing what is the good, the bad, the not great for you, and your priorities. What really is the thing that makes you so happy and brings you so much joy and cultivates that experience in your that grounding that experience in your heart that you just feel like if you have it you can overflow all of the love to everybody around you because you have that fulfilled within yourself. And whatever that looks like, take note of it. Go do it. Spend 20 minutes doing it or however if it's an activity, take as long as it takes to do it. But focus on that. Focus on giving yourself the love and care that you would give to your kids, that you would give to your partner or your spouse, that you would give to your best friend, because that's who you should be to yourself. You should be your own best friend and treat yourself like you are somebody that you love because you're in this body for however long. You've got to love it and you've got to love yourself because you're doing great things out in the world. And that's what boundaries help us do is help us see what makes us happy and fulfilled and can keep us on that path of being confident in the people we are, keep us happy, keep us giving all of the energy we can to those things that make us happy and going forward. And then when we get those unhealthy boundaries sliding in there, it starts to attack what we've built up and can easily say, oh, if somebody has this thought about you, and it could be somebody you respect that says, I don't like A, B, or C about you. And it just starts to chip away, chip away at all the walls that we built up till eventually that person's opinion is the opinion that matters. That person's opinion is what we're striving for. We're striving for that stamp of approval from that person or that thing, but um, that's what's going to define you in the long run. So I challenge you this weekend, take some time, breathe it in, breathe it out, go do something that is just that's for you, that serves you in any way and capacity, that fills up your cup. I know in my own space, in transparency, that this setting of boundaries has been something that I've reevaluated in the last week of things that I thought I was doing really great at and doing awesome at. I kind of became a slave to them in the long run, that I didn't want to be that slave. And it's taking a little bit of time to reset them. So, I mean, I am a work in progress. I'm giving advice, a real time advice as it comes, but um, it's a work in progress. But I am becoming better, and I've recognized that that's a thing. So I've made sure to make those hard stops or things that hard line of where I need to go. So, for example, running your own business is sometimes a night and a day, all day, 24-hour thing that goes on and on and on. And I am in the beginning stages of a launch for my program, and having that be out into the universe. I've put it out there to the universe that it's there, and as launch dates keep coming and different deadlines keep coming, it feels just like I am constantly, whether on my phone, messaging people on Instagram, or emailing people the things that they need, and building up this excitement for this launch. It's burning me out, but it's also keeping me from being not present in the space that I really want to be present in. And when I was when I realized it, it was more of like a light bulb. Like, I am emotionally drained, I am mentally exhausted, I am my heart and my cup is depleted. I have no more energy to give and to anybody, but I'm trying to give negative energy, not negative in that it's bad energy, but negative in the fact that I'm completely depleted. Um, I'm giving that depleted energy to those that love me the most and those that are supporting me, and they have understanding, but it's still not the same as if I'm being present and giving them that full energy, attention, emotion, and mental attention, and from those boundaries that I had prior to this experience. And so, going through reevaluating, it has made it so that I am setting those, okay, I am going to put my phone on do not disturb from this hour to this hour. I try to do it for at least 2 hours, especially around dinner time during the night, that I can focus 100% on be present with my family, because they are the ones that fill up my cup. They are my type of self care. And if they fill up my cup, I can give them back that energy, and I can give them back it tenfold in the long run, because I am full, and I can give that to every them and all of my priorities and everything going forward, because I am full. So it makes me, in a backwards way, a better business owner and a better content creator and a better mindset coach, in the fact that I have a full cup that I can give the full energy to what is needed. And so think about that too as you go through what you're going through and where you're at, that the energy is completely dependent on what you choose to give it to, that having those unhealthy boundaries are going to drain you. They're not going to give you or help you get to that space that you want to get to. We're all on a journey, and we all have goals, and we all have aspirations, and being on this journey, having those healthy boundaries, you have a higher chance of success to get there, because you know what is serving you and what's not. You have the ability and the confidence in yourself to say, yes, this serves me. Yes, this doesn't. No, this doesn't serve me, and not feel bad if it doesn't serve you and it's got to go away, and shed that guilt of saying, this doesn't serve me. It's not going to help me. I am going to go ahead and get rid of it. So, setting those boundaries, evaluate where you're at while you're taking your self care time. Evaluate what boundaries you have. Maybe some need to be moved. Maybe some need to be created. Maybe some need to be just adjusted a little bit here and there for what that is. Have the courage and bravery to talk about them if you need to someone, especially to yourself. Have the conversation in the mirror to yourself that says, this is something that is good for me. This is something that is not good for me. I'm setting this boundary because of these reasons, and I'm going to stick to them because I want to get to this place, whatever that looks like in your life. I hope that this has been enlightening. If you have questions or feedback or anything, please reach out to me. You can find me at mallory@beautifully blooming.com, and you can get any information or contact things at the website at www.beautifully blooming.com. You are listening to the Mindset Bloomcast. Holy cow. Mindset Bloomcast with Mallory. I'm your host, Mallory McGary. I'm also the founder and CEO of Beautifully Blooming. You are listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. the radio, TV, and podcast, the number one internet talk network. I'm so glad to have you here. I'm so glad for you listening. If you have feedback or anything, please let me know. Please take this into account, set those boundaries, and take care of yourself. Have a great weekend.